Welcome back to another interview for Local 𝗟𝗚. I'm Lorraine, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Sharon Galway. Sharon is a dedicated professional with nearly 30 years of experience in the financial services sector. She is the head of Estate and Trust Services at Protect NI, where she provides down-to-earth advice on wills, trusts, and powers of attorney. Beyond her financial expertise, Sharon is also a qualified life coach and runs her own company, SLG Coaching, where she helps individuals and organizations with career, leadership, and personal development. Today, we'll talk to Sharon about her dual professional life and why it's so crucial for everyone to get their financial affairs in order before it's too late. Hi, Sharon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to hand it over to you. If you can give us a brief background of Protect NI first, and then we'll discuss your coaching business later.
No problem. Thank you for having me, Lorraine. Just a wee bit of background about me. I started off in the insurance industry many moons ago, and I was actually in auditing, dealing with the claims side of things. So it was a very interesting role, to say the least. And that's where I got most of my experience in the financial services world, built a lot of contacts there. But as time moved on and I started my family, working in Belfast was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate with young children. So I was looking at other opportunities to work closer to home and have that flexibility. My contacts led me through then into the world of estate planning. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'll share a little bit about that in a moment. Protect NI, obviously, we do specialise in developing plans for families, for businesses, and strategies to protect what assets they have, and also succession planning for what's ahead. And it's a lot of what we don't like to think about, but when you reach that point in life where you realise you need to do something to protect what you've built, that's whenever we come into play and obviously work alongside those clients who need that support and advice. And everybody's different. And I suppose for me, in terms of what I do and why I'm so passionate about sharing what I share on here and other places, is all about making people more aware, because I think there is a lack of awareness around what can happen as you get on in life. Age is only a number really when it comes to these things, because I've dealt with clients who are in their early 30s, early 50s with a diagnosis that's completely unexpected, but their whole worlds have been turned upside down. They've children, they've assets, but they've nothing in place. And that is a situation you do not want to leave your family to deal with. So for me, I suppose my own life situation, a change in my own life situation led me through into the world of coaching. And obviously we'll touch on that as we go through this. But for me, I suppose my passion is getting people prepared for what's ahead. And that's in all areas of life, from getting to the stage in life like myself in my 40s. A lot of people find that when their children grow up, they've got more time to think about what they're going to do with their lives, where they want to go, what they want to experience, developing new skills. And sometimes we find ourselves really stuck, not knowing what direction to take. So I suppose for me, my passion is getting people into a place where they're in control. And that's across in the world of estate planning and in coaching, where you're in charge of the decisions, you're building what you want for your life, and you're then protecting that for the long term for your family and making sure that's passed through the bloodline. In terms of Protect NI, it's all about putting the strategies in place for people and working together with families, working through family dynamics, coming to a solution that best suits that family.
You touch on working with the families. I know in Northern Ireland especially, there's a lot of farms. So would the whole family come to you and say, okay, this is what situation we're in, how do we work this out? Or is it more or less just go and sort it out yourself type thing? Or what are you seeing happening?
Generally speaking, I do have a following on TikTok. So surprisingly enough, it's not actually the parents or the owners of the farm, it's the children thinking about the future. And in many cases, a lot of farmers are busy with the farms and they haven't really made any plans. They're just presuming that it'll be passed on to the eldest son or whatever, and they'll carry that on. But unfortunately, nowadays, life is very different because there's a lot of other events that can happen that can put a spanner in the works, as in care or potentially future divorce, bankruptcy. There's lots of factors that can start affecting that farm business long term. So it's important to have those conversations. And a lot of the younger generation are coming forward to say, look, we know that mum and dad need to do something, but it's a very difficult conversation to have with your parents. And I've been through that myself. You don't want to be seen as, that this is coming to you, and you don't want to be seen as interfering in their decisions as such as to what they want to do with their assets. But ultimately, you don't want your parents to lose that through the care system or through any other attackable event. So again, people that approach me are generally my age, thinking about their parents or their future. Maybe they've got children. It's that sandwich generation. They've got children of their own, so they're thinking about their own situation, but equally wondering what's going to happen with regards to their inheritance and their mum and dad. Perhaps they're showing signs of maybe not the same sharpness as they used to have, and they're concerned around a diagnosis coming forward, what happens in this case. So it's those conversations that kind of lead into then meeting with the extended family and then discussing, what are your intentions? What is it that you want to happen? And let me draw up a plan of how that would work out in terms of inheritance tax, in terms of protecting what you have and making sure that it's there for the bloodline for the long term and passing through the generations. And again, that's what many of us don't want to think about, but ultimately we're working hard to build what we have. So it's equally as important to make sure that is safeguarded for your children and their grandchildren's future. Otherwise, what's it all for?
Worst case scenario, if you have a business or if you have a farm or so on and so forth, if you don't have that in place, what's the worst thing that can actually happen?
If you don't have a will of any description, the rules of intestacy kick in. And that basically is the decision is made by the authorities. Now, in Northern Ireland, there's specifics around that. If you've no children, potentially, if you've got a partner, say, for example, and you're not married and you've no children, if you die intestate, your assets will not go to your partner. They'll go to your parents or your siblings or your aunts and uncles, whoever's left. So it can leave partners in a situation that's unwanted, let's just say. So it's important to make your wishes known, particularly for businesses. You've got the likes of a business will. Many people are leaving their assets to their family, but is that husband or wife able to step in and make those decisions with regards to the business? Have they been directly involved with the business? Things like that can really impact the business moving forward. So it's important to have those conversations and get shareholder agreements in place and make sure that if anything happens to you, there is a plan and who can step in and take over, because it can leave families in chaos, not knowing what to do, and businesses can fail because of that. So it's important to have those conversations now. And that's something that I highlight all the time with people when I'm speaking to them. Yes, it is a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to happen, because without that, what you're doing is leaving everything up in the air. And your family may not want your business. They may not want to be involved in that. You're deciding that for them. But equally, if they're married and they go through a divorce, that's attackable. So you could end up losing what you've built through divorce proceedings. So it's important to raise those conversations with your parents, with your loved ones, and say, look, I'm not looking at anything here, but I need to know what your idea is of how this is all going to run when you're no longer here, or if anything happens, because that's what can happen. And unfortunately, then that's when families end up in court and there's nothing left at the end of it when they pay all the fees. That's the outcome that a lot of people face, and it rips families apart because those conversations haven't been had. Yeah.
And I think also another thing that's so important now is that the generations and the older generations and younger generations are now needing care and the power of attorney. Can you give us a wee bit first about what is a power of attorney and how that should actually be set up correctly?
Yeah. Enduring power of attorney, a lot of people don't know what it is. They've heard me on TikTok sharing some things and sharing some stories about what can happen without it. It's just a simple legal document, and it's a document whereby you nominate attorneys, your loved ones, your family, whoever, to step in if you lose mental capacity. It's not something we want to think about ever happening, but it does. It can happen through accident or illness. And basically what you do is you nominate, I always say 2 people is enough, to act jointly and severally in relation to your financial and property affairs. And that means that they can go in and pay your bills and make sure that your mortgage is paid and your insurances are up to date. They can look after your property and make sure that the rates are paid if anything happens to you. Without that document, unfortunately, it's a different story. Banks will freeze accounts if they hear of loss of mental capacity until such times as controllership is granted. So that means the family can do nothing until they go through solicitors and High Court. When controllership is finally granted, which can take between 1 to 2 years, everything is frozen in the meantime. No decisions can be made, property can't be sold, nothing can be done. Controllership, once it's granted, it's an expensive process. It can cost thousands to get in place. But even at the other side of that, you're very restrictive in terms of what you can do. We had an instance, a story from a client once who had controllership, but they wanted to buy a special chair for their loved one who was vulnerable. I think it was over £300, and the authorities said it wasn't necessary. So things like that can be impacted. Controllership is the last thing that you can do to gain an element of control, but it's still very restrictive. With an enduring power of attorney, you may never need it. It's basically filed away. You allow your family members to know where it is in case it is needed. That's equally as important. A lot of people have legal documents, put them away and don't tell anybody about them. Same as a will. You need to make your family aware of where they're located in case they are needed. So an enduring power of attorney is basically there. It nominates your attorneys to step in and take over if anything happens to you. They then get that stamped by the authorities and they're good to go and take over your financial and property affairs. And that doesn't mean that they can go into your bank account and take your money. It means that they can act in your best interests. So it's very useful. We've had some cases whereby somebody has lost mental capacity and the family want to do some trust planning to protect the assets because they're concerned about care. Obviously, we need to take the scenarios into consideration in terms of when the diagnosis was and what the intentions are. But ultimately, it's fair and reasonable to presume that person would want to protect what they've built and make use of savings and other funds to obviously pay for their care, because it's not a matter of deprivation of assets. It's a matter of making sure that you're in control of what you have. The attorneys would be able to do some trust planning to help protect potentially the house from being taken to pay for care. So without that, the authorities through controllership, it's highly unlikely they would allow that to happen. There is an element of flexibility with an enduring power of attorney, and it's something that you may never need, but if it is needed, it's inexpensive. An enduring power of attorney with myself is, for a couple, is £300 to put in place, and that's each. And then if you need that at any point, I think it's about £180, gets it rubber stamped by the authorities. Once mental capacity is lost, your attorneys, they're free to look after what they need to for you.
And if you don't have that in place, then the family, are they liable for the cost of care?
No, that's a misconception as well. We did have a scenario, dreadful story, but a nurse, it was her story. Her mum was in long-term care and she died in care. And unfortunately, she lost her home, all her savings and everything through care to pay for her own care. The authorities wrote to the daughter after the loss of the mum to say there was £70,000 of fees outstanding. And this lady didn't know that she wasn't responsible for those fees. And she sold her own house to pay for them.
Oh my gosh.
That's a story. It does happen. A lot of people don't realise that it's only the person in care that is responsible for their own care fees. The family are not responsible. So that means that the person in care, their assets, their income, their savings will be used to pay for their care. The threshold here in Northern Ireland is you can hold on to 14,250. Anything above that and between 14,000 and 23,250, you have to contribute to your own care. Anything above 23,250 in assets and savings, you have to pay for your full care. As you can imagine, if you've savings over 23,000 and you have to pay for your full care, they look to do a financial assessment, obviously, when you go into care. So they will look at what other assets you own. And if you own your own house, obviously, if you've got a husband or a wife in the house, they're not going to put your husband or wife out. But if they pass away, then that house is yours and that can be sold. If you're a single person, again, that house can be sold to pay for your care. It's happening in my family right now. It does happen. There are people losing their homes because there's no plan in place. And if you do planning, trust planning, particularly well in advance of any diagnosis, there's a good chance that will be protected for the long term and against care fees. But it's all about timing and intention.
This may be a silly question, but how would the power of attorney then help in that case so that the house isn't sold? How could they stop that?
If someone, for example, has lost mental capacity, they've got their son and daughter as attorneys on their enduring power of attorney. As their attorneys, they have the ability to make decisions that will be in the best interest of that individual. Okay, so it doesn't mean they can go into their bank account and start withdrawing all their funds and spending it for themselves. It means that they make decisions that would benefit that individual. If they're about to go into care and care fees are a concern, might be a bit late to do planning at that point, but in the earlier stages, they could step in and decide to perhaps protect their house within a trust structure for the benefit of the children, grandchildren. In some cases, that individual may already have a will in place, which would be an ideal scenario whereby you could see their wishes, what they want to happen, their assets, who they want those assets to go to, and they can do some additional protective planning in line with their wishes. They're leaving everything to their children through their will, then it's perfectly reasonable to expect that they would want to protect their house for their children long term, and therefore a trust structure is something that could be considered.
Is there a certain number of people that you should have as a power of attorney, or is one fine?
I'll give you an example of one that was done, not by me, and I raised a concern with it. A husband and wife in their mid to late 70s had an enduring power of attorney done a couple of years ago, and there was only each other had been appointed as each other's attorney. So husband was the wife's attorney and the wife was the husband's attorney. The husband took a stroke, okay, and was okay mentally, but physically couldn't walk, needed care. So he was his wife's attorney. So if anything happened to her in terms of losing capacity, he wasn't in any position to step in and take over. Therefore, that enduring power of attorney really wasn't valid. It wasn't of any use. So I always recommend at least two, probably no more than that. There are families that want all children nominated as attorneys just to keep it right. There's no problem with that. It's just sometimes that can overcomplicate what needs to be done. Realistically speaking, two people is more than suffice. If you want your husband or wife to be an attorney, that's absolutely fine. But I would also recommend one other, be it a son or daughter or even a family member that you trust to step into that role. And again, another important point is, and I think I touched on it earlier, there is an option to have your attorneys act jointly or jointly and severally, and never recommend jointly. Simple reason being, it means that both parties must act together always. And that's in terms of the decisions that need to be made. So if one party becomes ill and unable to step into that role, then the other cannot act. It's important to note that jointly and severally would be a better option. But again, it's up to the individual. If they're not comfortable with that arrangement, then in some cases they will insist on it being joint attorneys. But that's up to the individual to decide that.
Yeah, it makes sense whenever you think of it, not to be both agreeing. Yeah, you'd automatically think that we'd fall out.
Happens.
You mentioned gift and trusts. What is a trust and how do those work?
Well, a trust is a legal arrangement. Like a will, a trust outlines your wishes in terms of what you want to happen, your assets. So I'll give a basic trust example. And I suppose I can share my mum and dad's situation here. I always highlight it because it's a prime example of what can happen. But if you have the right planning in place, there is protection there. Unfortunately, a number of years ago, my mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and a big blow for the family, to say the least. But at the same time, I was going through a divorce, and my intention was to make sure that mum and dad's property and assets were protected. My concern was mum going into care, because it was in the family. It was my mum's dad that had Alzheimer's as well, and he ended up in care. So it was always in the back of my mind that could potentially happen. And mum and dad were never apart. If anything happened to mum, dad wouldn't last long without her. That was in the back of my mind. We went to solicitor to get mum and dad's will changed. I wanted my name removed from the will initially until I get over the other side of my divorce. But I noted that there wasn't anything mentioned about what would happen if my sister's marriage broke down or anything like that. Not that there was any concern there, but it wasn't mentioned. So we decided to follow on with that and do some trust planning to protect the house for my sister and I and the grandchildren. So what we did was mum and dad owned our house jointly, which most people do. We severed the joint tenancy on that property, and we created what's called a tenant in common arrangement. There's two ways in which you can own your house: jointly with your partner or tenant in common. And that's where each of you own a distinct share of that asset. So mum and dad, for example, owned 50% each as a tenant in common. And then what we did was we created a lifetime trust, directing each 50% into a lifetime trust, giving each other a life interest in each other's 50% share. But that meant that if anything happened to mum going into care, there was still only 50% in the pot potentially, but that pot was protected within a trust structure. And basically a trust structure is just a legal document. It's noted on land registry as well in terms of the trustees now as the owners of that asset as such, not direct owners, but they manage that asset through the trust arrangement. That meant that mum, if she ended up in care, dad obviously wouldn't be put out of the house anyway, but if anything happened to him through his death or demise, that 50% share that he held in trust, in a lifetime trust, would then be directed on his death to my sister and I, again into a trust structure, making sure that if my sister and I were married, going through a divorce, that there was no claim to that estate, because we don't actually own that property. We hold it in trust for our benefit during our lifetime, and then for our children and grandchildren as well. That meant that even if mum did end up in care and dad passed away, his 50% was now protected in trust for my sister and I. Mum's 50% was in a lifetime trust, and when she passed away there, that then directed into a trust again on her death, so it's held in trust for my sister and I. It's a legal arrangement and it safeguards your assets for the long term. It's bloodline planning effectively.
Is there any high cost of doing that? Because you mentioned that you're changing deeds and stuff.
There's conveyance involved in trust planning, because what you're actually doing is you're removing the ownership. Mum and dad no longer owned their property outright. If you own anything outright, it's attackable. It's attackable from care, it's attackable from other events such as divorce and financial difficulties, creditors potentially coming after you. If you do a trust for that asset, what you're actually doing is removing it from your estate. You're no longer the owner, the outright owner of that asset. The trust now holds that property, and that's noted on land registry. So for example, in mum and dad's case, they were the trustees of their own trust alongside my sister and I. There was 4 trustees of their trust. That's noted on land registry. They no longer own that property. The trust owns that property and is held for our benefit. So dad still has the life interest, nothing changed. He still lives in the house. We can't sell the house without dad. If he wants to sell the house, then we sign the contract of sale along with him as trustees. But day to day, nothing changed apart from the legal arrangement in behind the scenes.
It's not like you have to sell the house to the trust and pay stamp duty or anything.
It's a legal arrangement, but there is conveyance, excuse me, there is conveyance involved in it that is incorporated within the planning. So obviously there's conveyance fees and then obviously the legal documents that go along with that. But once that's in place, then there's nothing further to be done as such. Nothing really changes apart from what's written on the legal documentation, the trust deed. And then the letter of wishes then will outline how you want that asset looked after during your lifetime and then after you're gone. And then that can't be changed.
Can businesses also do the trust?
They can do trust planning as well. There's different types of trusts. Obviously, if it's a business, you can do different types of trusts for businesses as well. You could be delving into family investment company structures, which are obviously a little bit more complex in terms of estate planning, but there are options for businesses to delve into the world of FICs, and that will give the structure for the business, but also the personal assets, and make sure that they're safeguarded, but also reduce inheritance taxes. And it's a more tax efficient route for those bigger businesses, maybe that incorporate rental properties and other trading businesses within it. So there are structures that you can use that will be more tax efficient, but obviously provide that succession planning in terms of what happens if anything happens to me. There is somebody stepping in as a director, and that flexibility is there to have that already planned out.
I didn't know anything about that. And then we also talk about gifting assets. So what's that there? And is there any repercussions with that?
Yeah, I'll use a prime example of what a lot of people, I suppose the questions that I get asked all the time about your main residence. If I've gifted that to my children, surely the care authorities can't come in and take that house. There's a few things to consider in that. Gifting your property to your children, I never advise anybody to do that. For the simple reason being, there's a few reasons. Number one, you're still living in that property. In most cases, you've gifted it away to your children. So now it sits in their estate, but it also sits in your estate because you're still benefiting from living there. And under the gifting rules, it's a gift with reservation of benefit, which means that you've gifted it away, but it's not really effective after the 7 years because you're still living there. You're still benefiting from living in that property. You're still treating it as your main residence. But equally now, you're also at risk of that property being included in any divorce proceedings. And you could potentially lose your house. So I never advise anybody to gift their main residence outright. There are other ways that you can do that through protective trust that will protect the asset. You can still live there for your lifetime, but ultimately the beneficiaries are going to be your children as you wish. And it's protected for them as well from divorce, bankruptcy, and all the other attackable events. So gifting and the 7-year rule only applies to assets that you no longer retain a benefit from.
I didn't know that. Everybody automatically just gives it to their children once they get to a certain age.
Unfortunately, the care authorities can still consider that property within the financial assessment because if you're still living there, you may have gifted it on paper, but you're not paying rent to your new landlords who own the house now. So in most cases, that is the case. And therefore, they may question your intentions around that gifting. Why did you gift that property? Most likely to prevent losing it through care, potentially. So there's little argument there. So timing and intention is really key on making any of those decisions, particularly when it comes to gifting. And a lot of people have the wrong information or misunderstand what the gifting rules are in terms of those assets that you're still benefiting from. You need to be very careful.
Now I got people going to their solicitor to draw up a will. Is there something that they should always make sure that's in a will? And make sure you ask the solicitor, okay, this has to be in the will, because like I know whenever we did our will, it was just a basic will. You didn't know what to ask.
Yeah, and most people don't, in fairness. A basic will is what it says in the tin, it is basic. And what is a will? It's merely your wishes. That's an expression of your wishes, isn't it? There's nothing substantial in there in terms of the nitty-gritty stuff. It's basically, for most people, husband and wife, it'll be a mirror will. They'll be exactly the same, leaving whatever to each other during their lifetime. And then whenever the second person passes on, it ultimately goes to the children in equal shares, if there are children. And generally speaking, that's across the board for most people. Unfortunately, that doesn't account for estranged children. It doesn't account for family dynamics, arguments, contesting. A basic will is easy to contest in the court of law. Somebody can come up out of the woodwork and say, oh, my mum or dad was supposed to leave me X, Y, and Z. And if there's no evidence contrary to that, then it's easily contested. So it's important to make sure that your wishes are expressed within a will, and make sure that if there is anyone that you want to exclude, and this is something that a lot of people don't realise, by not mentioning them in your will, you're actually potentially creating a reason for them to contest. So I always say, if you're wanting to exclude somebody, mention that person in your will. Throw them £100. Simple, they're mentioned in the will.
So you can't more or less say, do not give XYZ anything.
It's better not. I would mention them in the will and say I would give them £100.
Right.
And that means that's your intention to do. You intended that. You've put it specifically in your will, and that person is named. And it's important to do that. Equally, it's important to mention guardians as well for your children. If you have young children, make sure you have your guardians there. And just, I suppose, anything specific that you want to leave behind, any specific legacies, monetary or otherwise, make sure that you note that down as well, so there's no arguments come that time. That was for me. Mummy said I was going to get that watch or X, Y, and Z. If there's something that you know that's going to create a problem, or what I do for most people is say, if you're not wearing it or you're not having any benefit of it now, do it now while you're still alive.
Yeah, and I suppose also make sure you have the power of attorney.
The power of attorney is a starting point in any estate plan for me. When I'm talking to any client or potential client, that's the first thing that we put in place, because without that, your hands are really...
Yeah, I don't think I have that. Because it was never really mentioned, I don't think.
That's it. And unfortunately, you go to your solicitor and you ask for a will, that's what you'll get. And they'll go through the basics. But unless you specifically ask for something, you won't be advised. And that's just the way it works. I suppose I always put somebody in a position whereby they have the protective measures in place, and then we look at the more complex stuff afterwards. I always make sure that the basics are there. So better to have a will than not a will, basic or not. But equally, if you've got property and other assets, it's important to maybe look at planning for those as well, and potentially do some lifetime planning as well as death planning.
Wrapping up regarding your Protect NI, is there one piece of advice you would recommend for everybody to do?
I would say don't leave it until it's too late. I think that's the most important message. Don't leave it until the point of need, because that's when it is too late to do anything. Look at your assets now. Think about, if anything were to happen to you, what would you like to happen? And then start to put those plans in place. Make them known. Have the conversations with your family. Communicate your wishes so that the family know where they stand. There's nothing worse than being around a table with the family and hearing, Dad didn't tell me that he was going to do that, or I don't want this, don't be leaving the business to me. So have the conversations now. Don't wait until, you know, you're faced with a diagnosis and then start looking. It's better to have your ducks in a row nice and early, particularly if you've got a young family. That's when you should be starting to look at putting at least the basics in place to make sure that you've got an element of protection and, more importantly, peace of mind.
Yeah, that goes a long way. So wrapping that up, we've now got SLG Coaching, another one of your businesses. I don't know how you find time for both. So could you tell us a wee bit about that?
SLG Coaching started off over COVID, believe it or not. I think a lot of businesses did. People became more aware of their own mortality and started to think about experiencing life to the fullest. And I think for me, I was at that point in my life. I'd been through divorce. I basically started over from scratch. And I just was at a stage where I knew there was something more for me. And I knew that I needed to do some work on myself and my own mental health. And I wanted to just make improvements. I'd had enough. So I suppose you could call it the rock bottom point, where you feel that, right, the only way is up now. I need to start making some changes for my own life. And I used COVID as an opportunity to do that. I'd done a lot in the world of mindset. I had studied quite a bit, so I was fascinated by the workings of the mind. Having been through counselling from the age of 17, I went through counselling for years, dealing with some things. And as much as it helped me, I always felt like I never got beyond talking about my problems. Counselling is very much that. As much as it does help you come to terms with things, I think you do reach a point in your life where enough's enough. I'm done talking about my problems. Now I want to move forward. So where's the tools? What do I do? Because you're still in that place. You're still reliving the same issues over and over again. So for me, I suppose I was fascinated in the workings of the mind and why I went through years of depression in my early years and why I wasn't able to regulate my own emotions. There must have been another way. So I did do a lot of work trying to understand myself. And I think over COVID, it was the perfect opportunity to really delve deep into that and work on me. I suppose my story is I created a morning routine, a morning ritual for myself. I started to meditate, albeit I tried it before and didn't work. I was one of those, it doesn't work. I've tried it, I've done it doesn't work. And I spoke to myself and said, look, tried and tested, yes, but do it again. Just do it and just keep doing it and stay consistent. I did the meditation. I wrote in my gratitude journal every morning. I read a chapter or two of a book every morning, and it was to do with the mind, understanding the mind. And then I exercised. I actually did 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝐿.
I think everybody did 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝐿 during COVID.
I know, my daughter said to me the other day, she was talking about 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝐿. She says, I hate 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝐿. She says, 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝐿, and that timer went off every morning over COVID. And she says, we used to hear it from upstairs, the timer going off and you bang on the floor. So she says, I hate it. She says, it's actually trauma for me. But I loved my morning ritual, and then I walked every day as well for a few miles. So all of a sudden, I went from feeling not so good to an overnight, actually, life isn't as bad as I thought it was. And nothing had changed externally, but internally, I felt different. So I started to actually really help me. And I started to become more and more interested into the workings of the mind. And I thought something I could actually maybe help other people who are at that stage in their life. Maybe they've been through a trauma, or they've lost a loved one, or they've gone through divorce, or they're maybe just at a stage where they need to change career, but they're so tied up in what they're doing, they don't have any other experience, and they don't know where to go or where to start with any of it. I could maybe help somebody else. The long story short, I went on to Tony Robbins. If you've heard of Tony Robbins, I did his first challenge over COVID and went live to 750,000 people. So that was the starting point for me. And it was all very vulnerable stuff. We had to go on live every day after his 3 to 4 hour session. It was phenomenal, absolutely life-changing for me. And it really was life-changing for me because I was in that world back then, and I was just like a sponge to everything that he was telling me. And I forced myself to do the lives, and it brought me out of myself massively. SLG Coaching was created from a video that I recorded of my story and sharing the vulnerable parts of me. A lot of family and that didn't know my story. And when I shared it bravely, that was the start of SLG Coaching. And I decided to continue to share little snippets of my journey from rock bottom to rebuilding and my journey of self-discovery. And that's why I'm sitting where I am today with 2 businesses and enjoying life and really living life to the fullest. Whereas before, I was going through the motions. And I think that's the story for a lot of people. I was in a rut. I was in a job which I enjoyed, don't get me wrong, but I was under a lot of pressure. I had a lot of traveling to do. I had young children. I was trying to navigate it all, and I didn't have a life. I was just existing. And I think many of us find ourselves in that situation where you're just going through the motions and not really enjoying what you're doing anymore. And I was in my 40s, thought, there's more to life. there's definitely more to life and there's more to me.
What's your clientele for SLG coaching? So what do you do and how does your programs work?
I did run a Your Life Matters program for over a year. It was a group coaching session. I do it globally, so it's all done on Zoom. Generally speaking, all my appointments are on Zoom unless required in person. It works really well. Obviously, I started over COVID, so for me, that was the only option, and I've just sustained that. But working one-on-one with me is slightly different. I've had people work with me for 3 years. I've had people work with me for 12 weeks, one-on-one sessions every now and again. It just varies per client and where their needs and requirements are. But I'll work with somebody from, be it career progression, building confidence, maybe just delving into other areas of their life that they need to work on, be it financial side or relationship side. We all have many areas that we could make some improvements in. And again, it's all down to focus on what's important to you in that moment. Generally, people come to me maybe for career progression or whatever, and we end up talking about relationships because a lot of that directly impacts how you progress in life. So if your relationship is not doing so well, it's going to affect the other areas of your life, be it you're maybe eating more, your diet's not great, or you're not giving your all to your business or your work because you're focused on other things. So everything amalgamates. So it's important to bring that all together and work through that with each individual. And everybody's different as to what works for them and what they want to focus on. So it's an all size fits all type of coaching. One thing that I was told not to do from the start was don't offer everything, niche it right down. And that was a difficulty for me because for me in my own journey, it was more about identity for me. And I think that's where I started, and then into leadership, as in leading your own life. So discovering who you are again. And a lot of people, certainly in my stage of life, find themselves, they're a mother, they're a wife, they're an employee, but who actually am I? If my children aren't there and they don't need me anymore and my marriage is broke down and I've moved position, who am I? What do I want for my life? What do I want the next 20, 30 years to look like? And I think that's where I find myself. So it's all about rebuilding that identity, maybe creating a completely new identity, which is what I did. I work on confidence building and drawing up plans of action, brainstorming exercises to get those ideas flowing for people so that they don't fit inside one box. And I think that's where most of us find ourselves in life, is in that box. As Tony Robbins talks about, you live in a box, you go to work in a box, you work in a box, you come home, everything is in a box. And for me, it was taking a step outside of that and saying, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to put myself into new situations. I'm going to get into different circles of people and I'm going to build on that. And that's what I encourage my clients to do as well.
So from what I hear, it's more like life coaching.
Yes.
If somebody is at a crossroads and they just don't know where to go next, because often we do find ourselves, especially also your kids are getting older. And if you've been at stay-at-home mum with your kids, like, where's your identity going whenever the kids do leave the house and they're so lost?
Exactly. And that's for women and men. I work with both, and it's the same for everyone. Certainly if you go through a life change like divorce or losing a loved one, I think it's that point in time where you're forced to revisit things. You're forced to make decisions you didn't think you would have to make. So it was different for me. I've been through that. I was forced to rebuild. I was forced to start again. I was forced to look at my future and say, okay, that future that I thought was going to be there is no longer there. So I have to now start making another plan. So I was forced into that position, but a lot of people are just going around in circles, and I still would have been in the same situation. I know I would have been. And I was fortunate enough, I say fortunate because it was a very difficult situation, but I was fortunate enough to actually reach that point where I had to rebuild. I had to make those decisions, and it grew me as a person. I could never imagine 20, 30 years ago doing what I do now, but I love my life because I've created it. I haven't just accepted that's where I'm at, that's the experience that I've had, so that's where I stay. I am always looking for opportunities. I'm always looking to expand and grow. And that's the kind of encouragement that I want to give to others and share that with others, because anything really is possible. It's just that many of us don't take the time to actually think about it and properly think about what we want. We know what we would like to happen. We know what others want for us. And we maybe have our house and we've got our car and we've got our job and we think that's it, we've made it in life. But actually, you make it in life when you feel that real sense of achievement every day you wake up. You make it in life when you feel fulfilled with what you're doing, when your relationships are healthy, when you're fit and healthy and you feel good about yourself and your confidence is growing every day. That's what living is. Existing is just accepting everything as it is, and there's more to life than that.
Yeah, I so agree. So you mentioned one-on-one session and then your life matters. So you do, by the sounds of it, you do one-on-one sessions and group sessions?
Yeah, I've just completed a group session there after just over a year. I had to stop it because of my poor mum becoming unwell. She passed away 8 weeks ago. So we've had to care for mum and all that goes along with that. So I had to put a stop on that. But yes, I will be back to it soon enough. But yeah, one-on-one coaching would be my focus at the minute. It's more manageable for me.
For your vision for the future for your coaching, are you more going down the coaching line or are you staying more with the finance side?
That's an interesting question. And actually, I was just having that with a fellow coach yesterday, that conversation. I think for me, in what I do, I'm constantly coaching anyway. In the conversations that I have with people, I'm dealing with families, I'm dealing with dynamics, I'm dealing with those difficult conversations, getting people to, I suppose, look at things now and make decisions now rather than leaving it. And that's coaching. It's now, we're not going to park this, we're going to deal with it and we're going to work our way through that. And a lot of that is coaching. I do grievance coaching as well. I work with families who have lost a loved one and they need to do some plans. I have time for my clients. I sit with them. I talk them through things. I support them. So that's an ongoing thing for me anyway. My passion is both, obviously, but it feeds into each other. I have done events whereby I brought my estate planning knowledge, my wills and trust knowledge, and I've also brought my coaching knowledge in terms of building a business and starting from scratch and building it from there. So it kind of complements each other.
I suppose whenever you think of it for your coaching, you need to have your finances in order as well. And that's where you come in as well from the financial side.
A lot of people, obviously coaching costs money and some people just don't have the capacity to invest in the long-term coaching packages. So I suppose my role there, I've been there. So I know what that feels like when you know that you need it, you know that you want it and you want that direction, but you can't afford it. I've had those difficult conversations with clients and I've been in that situation myself many years ago. I remember, if you follow Bob Proctor,
yeah,
he always talked about you make the decision first and then the money will come. And I never believed that. And I remember I was coached by a guy in Australia. He was one of Bob Proctor's consultants. And I was working with him for 8 months. He was in Australia. And he approached me and he said the same thing to me about what he went through with Bob. And Bob said, you make the decision first and then the money will come. And he's like, I don't believe that. Money just doesn't come from nowhere. And he goes, no, you don't need to worry about it. You put it out to the universe or whatever it is, and you've made your decision. And all of a sudden, when you make that decision, everything starts to align for you. And all these opportunities come forward. And I remember him having that conversation with me at the time, and I was at that time not financially great. And I said, goodness, you're talking about 30,000 of an investment and stuff. So this was not just small.
That's not wee pennies.
This was like a swallow situation. That was, I suppose, for me, the turning point was realizing that I had that power in my hands. And it is true, when you do make a decision in life, a solid decision, and you know that's the direction that you're going to go, all the opportunities do come. I was at that point not a qualified coach. I had that conversation. Shortly after that, somebody approached me from the south of Ireland who had seen me on the Tony Robbins challenge live and had watched me for 2 years and approached me and said, I want to make you a certified life coach. and took me through the whole thing. I was also then approached by one of Tony's leadership team to coach me personally, and I was with him for 3 years. So all of a sudden, when I made the decision that's the route that I was going, all these other people came out of the woodwork to help me. I do firmly believe that the opportunities are there. You just need to open the door. You make your decision.
Wow, so you were coached by some pretty high people. That's amazing. Where are you going in the next 5 to 10 years? What's coming up?
Hopefully the Maldives. I don't know. I suppose 5 to 10 years time, I'll be again in a very different place. My son's already in university. My daughter is studying her GCSE, so they will no longer need me so much. So it's the world is my oyster, I guess. I just want to grow. I really want to grow, protect NI, grow brand awareness, what we do, and really get the word out there. So I think for me, that's my passion. The coaching end of things, I suppose, in the back of my mind, I would like to be on that stage someday, motivating, getting women and men to a place in their lives where they're loving life again and have that fire back in their belly. Because it was a story like that changed my world many years ago. Somebody on a stage told me their story and I was walking it. So that inspired me, and I would like to be able to share that with others.
It's amazing to hear all that you're doing and also to fit in all that you're doing. It's like, my gosh, but it's incredible.
Plus go to the gym, learn to do our strength training.
Yeah, but that there's our wee hours in the morning. So it is. Yeah, because if you don't look after yourself first, then you can't look after everybody else.
Well, that's true. You need your energy. But as long as you enjoy what you do, I think that's priority, isn't it, really? And making sure you have time for yourself. People always say to me, how do you get the time to do all that you do? And I suppose I just have created it. I've got that routine, and those rituals are that's what keeps me grounded. And I do always make time for self-care. It's priority above and beyond, because without your health, you have nothing. Without your energy, you can't run the businesses. You can't be there for other people. So you have to take care of you first. And that's always been a priority this last number of years from I started this journey.
And you're looking fantastic on it as well, I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, Sharon, thank you very much for spending time with us. For anyone who wants to learn more about Sharon's services or get started on their own financial plan, you can find a link to both her businesses' profile on 𝗟𝗶𝗄, which also includes all of her social handles. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on 𝗟𝗶𝗄.